overserved. This is Callaway Live. I'm Harry Arnett, and I can honestly say we've done about 70 of these shows, and tonight is the show that I've been looking forward to since we started the show. This is a show about innovation. This is a show about content. This is a show about having fun. And our guest tonight, Bill Simmons, really wraps all of that up into one. You've known him for 20 years as the sports guy, ESPN for much of that time, and then now as the founder and really the inspiration behind the Ringer Media Company on the internet and in fine podcasts served near you. Please welcome to our show our buddy, Bill Simmons. There he is! Bill Simmons! Good to see you, man. Where the hell have you been, Bill Simmons? So going way back 3 years ago, I said, Bill, you got to come to our show. He said, I'd love to. I just want to let a little bit of the controversy die down. And every year it's some new controversy.
Well, last year the controversy was 28-3. You didn't want to see me for like 6 months.
And that's all the time we have tonight. Callaway Live. That's shameless pandering to the Patriots fans.
I'll come on, and Harry's like, Harry doesn't want to see you.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, maybe I
lost a very expensive dinner to you.
I know. You left out in your opening credits for my resume, introduce the world to Joe House.
Yes, and
he'd been in private stealth. I'm super proud of that.
I don't know if you're proud of that. But that's a great example. Even going back to when you started, you're the only guy I can remember waiting for my dial-up to actually connect to read what you were doing on AOL and then ESPN.
That's how long I've been around, because I remember like in the mornings surfing the internet and having this long phone cord and I used to do this thing called the Daily Links and would just go from site to site, and I would have to have TV on because it would take so long to go from like ESPN to SI to whatever the sites were.
It took real commitment.
It really did, and I would need TV, so I would watch like ER, I would watch 90210, I would just, whatever was on in the mornings, The White Shadow, all these shows that were syndicated because I needed something to do when I was just waiting for things to download.
And not all the millennials are now Googling that right now. Like, White Shadow? Ken Howard, what is that?
The millennials don't know how well they have it. They really don't. Like, the ability to watch an NBA game on your iPhone, if you told me that 20 years ago, my head would have exploded. It's incredible.
I had a little bit of football anxiety this year where I'd have to walk around the block a few times when things got a little tense, which happened every Falcons game. And I remember, I'd do it with my phone thinking, I'm watching an NFL game on my phone, walking around the block.
Yeah.
I mean, who would have thought that could have happened 5 years
Well, I remember when my daughter started playing soccer like 6 years ago, and there would be a Sunday game. It would be like, all right, well, I got to go to her game, but I wouldn't know what has happened with football, and I'd be on my phone like looking at the scores. Now I could actually have the game on. So it's like one of these where you have it like this, and you're like, go, honey, and then she turns away, or like this, and, oh, no, you're doing great. Just do it that way.
Yeah, following all your Tom Brady stuff.
Yeah.
And when you first got started, I don't know who your influences were, but the thing that really appealed to me was you really attacked it in a way I'd never seen. As a fan, weaving in a lot of my favorite pop culture stuff, which you just mentioned, and
I used to also attack, which I think that's a young writer thing where you just kind of go after everybody. There's probably some poison I would take back. But, I mean, you don't really – I think most writers don't usually model themselves after one person. Usually it's like 5 or 6 people you take little pieces from. And that's kind of what I did. There was a whole bunch of different writers I read growing up, and a book that was really influential to me was called Wait Till Next Year, which was by Mike Lupica and William Goldman. It was set like it was 1987 New York sports, and Lupica was the writer, and Goldman was the fan, and he wrote from the fan's perspective. And by the end of the book, I just felt like he was my friend who liked New York sports, and I was like, that should work. That feels like something. So I had always kept that in mind. I had a column when I was in college, and I kind of did a bad imitation of that with some other people thrown in. And then eventually you kind of settle into what your style is.
Well, then ESPN picked you up.
Yeah.
And you were on the network, not just on the website, but on the network for years and years. And
when the website really, I think, mattered more than maybe it does now. Even I'm sure the uniques are up and stuff. But back then we didn't have a lot of internet choices. So getting on ESPN was a really big deal. It was like this platform that there weren't a lot of in 2001, And I think now it's much easier to get discovered and all that stuff. But remember, like, when ESPN, I remember Peter Gammons went there maybe 2000. He brought his column there. And I always thought that was the biggest moment in internet sports journalism. Maybe not just to that point, but maybe ever. Because that was the first time you had to go on the internet to read somebody. So somebody like my dad, who could barely find my column, and he's like, Gammons is on ESPN, I got to figure this out. So I type in ESPN.com. I'm like, yeah, that's how it is. Then you press return, and yeah, Gammons over. And how do I find him? Do I, but that's what a lot of people were like. When I had my old site, people would ask me what I did, and I'd be like, I write a sports column. Who do you write for? They would think it would be the Boston Globe, and I'd be like, it's my own website. It's on Digital City Boston, and they would just kind of turn their head like you were telling them you were like a porn producer or something. And then eventually it started to shift, and I would say by like 2003, 2004, it became much cooler to write on the internet, I think.
I mean, right at the forefront. I've always admired, you guys know about this show, that anybody that's on the show is really just people that we like to meet and who influence us.
That's not true. They told me like there was 3 that nobody liked.
There are 3, yeah.
There's 3 out of 70. There's
3 out of 70
3 stinkers. I heard.
They were real duds. But you always created your own job in media, which I always admired that from.
It was not by choice.
Necessity.
Yeah. It's either that or bartending.
But even like podcasting, you were the first person I remember. I mean, this is 10 years ago. Now it seems like
11.
everybody's got we've got 3 podcasts. Everybody's got a podcast. But it felt like you were the first to kind of embrace that medium, even while ESPN probably didn't even really take it all that seriously, I don't think.
Even this year, I don't think they take it seriously. I'm always going to try stuff, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but a lot of times it does. And I think like you got to keep swinging and keep trying things. But like the podcast is a good example. I just looked at that as I'd heard Mark Stein interview. It was like Mark Stein or Chad Ford. I think one of them interviewed Danny Ainge. And it was just on the website, and I was like, I pressed it, and all of a sudden they were having an interview, and I was like, what the hell is this? So I emailed them, and I was like, I want one of these. How do I get one? And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, I want one. Can I just call people? And they sent me the equipment.
They sent you a box full of stuff.
They sent me a box with a headphone.
Yeah.
And it was so primitive back then. My second guest was Adam Carolla. And he came over, but we didn't have 2 headphones. So he called me from my driveway, and he was a guest, and I'm on my headphones watching him walk around my driveway. And I was like, wow, this is not going to make it. And I don't know, I've done like 800 podcasts at this point. I don't even know how many.
And the guests that you've had, I mean, during that time I don't know if you feel like, you validated the medium or well,
I think a lot of people did. I think having Obama on was a big moment, though. That was in 2012. We ran it and they wanted to run it as like a podcast / video thing. He wanted to come on in 2008 when I think it was spring, and it seemed like he was going to get the nomination. And I knew John Favreau, who's now the Pod Save America, who worked for The Ringer a little bit too. He was the speechwriter, and he arranged it, and Obama was going to come on. And ESPN squashed it, and I was way up there with the most upset I've been at them, because I really felt like he was going to be the president. And at that point, nobody even barely knew what a podcast was. So it would have been like if we just created some new technology right now, and a year from now, we had somebody who's about to be the president on it. Like that was, podcasts had no cachet whatsoever. And 4 years later when he came on, they still didn't really have a lot of cachet. And I always feel like stuff is 5 years behind a lot of times. I would say around 2013, 14, podcasts became something. Now it's like, as you said, everybody has one.
Yeah.
I saw you built a little podcast studio in here.
Yeah, we sort of create our own reality around here, as you know. So we've got a little studio down there.
Autograph Brady photo, should I send her?
Yeah, maybe we should. We'll find a spot for it. I can't promise you it'd be prominently displayed.
By your feet.
But same, yeah, maybe like a rug.
Yeah, rug.
Yeah. That'd be good. That'd be good. But we were so inspired by what you were doing and what others were doing on sort of creating these direct-to-consumer pieces that were just mainly about cool content that didn't have to fit in the parameters of, okay, well, you can tell a brand story in 30 seconds. You can tell a brand story in a minute. It's going to cost you twice as much. But more, what does the golfer or the consumer really want to hear from, and then start from there instead of what's the existing distribution telling us. And we got a lot of that from the kind of stuff that you guys are certainly doing now in the Ringer with video and podcasting. It's why, how we know each other well from kind of working together on a lot of that stuff. You mentioned you brought us House, but what's your perspective on kind of where all this is headed from a consumer standpoint? Because I feel like that's really where you began, as you put yourself right in the head of the consumer. Yeah, we were lucky at Grantland, in the early stages, we didn't really have that ambitious of a plan at that point. I felt like there were some holes with long form writing and trying to get good writers together and things like that, using ESPN's money for kind of good for once. And we knew there was podcast network potential. And then after that, we didn't know. And our hope was that things were going to grow, but who knows how it's going to grow. Within, even as we were innovating the site, the iPad started. That completely changed how people read. People started reading on their phones. And all of a sudden, within a couple of years, it's much harder to read a 7,500-word long-form piece on your phone. So you got to figure out what the balance is. But like in 2012, YouTube was just throwing around money. Every once in a while, people just throw around money, and it's great, and you just kind of grab it before they figure out that it's a bad idea. And YouTube was just throwing around money, and we were trying to get some, and we did. And that. Now all of a sudden, we're able to launch some of our video stuff. And it was a lot of money, and we were like, all right, let's try stuff. And we built this studio out of an electrical closet and tried all these different things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But we kept trying stuff, and I think the spirit of that has obviously carried over to the Ringer in some ways. Like I remember 2013 maybe, we wanted to do a March Madness homemade studio show, and the streaming stuff isn't where it is now. Like now if we did it, I could do it on my phone, and we could just start our own streaming show. But in 2013 you couldn't, and we had to rent, it was crazy, this giant pole that allowed us to stream like relatively instantaneously from the guest house in the back of my house. And the guys brought the pole in and they broke my basketball court, and I was like so pissed. And this giant thing's up, and it's like, is this gonna cause a fire? And we rented it for like $10,000 or something. It was crazy. And 5 years later, we could just do that with iPhones. Yeah. So I think you keep taking chances, but you also have to kind of expect that things are gonna change. So I look at where things are in 2018, and I think it's impossible to predict what it's going to be like 5 years from now. Like 5 years from now, you might be able to have Phil Mickelson hit a Callaway ball in some VR hologram that's in my living room, and I could just be like, wow, there's Phil Mickelson. He's 3 feet away hitting a 9-iron. We don't know. Did you see us working on that back there? Maybe. I'm sorry. Did I spill some secrets? Sorry, guys. Sorry. Yeah. No, that's perfectly acceptable because we have a lot of holograms around here, Bill. Holograms are going to be in. Maybe including a Bill hologram. But so you don't have to be nearly as subversive about these ideas as I felt like you had to be when you were at ESPN. I always felt like the stuff that you were attached to, you like snuck it past the brass to get it done, whether it's 30 for 30 or some of the other things that we mentioned with podcasting and even some of your columns. Well, 30 for 30, I was lucky because I had bosses who at least encouraged us to come up with ideas. And their mindset was basically, I think bosses can be one of two ways, and you guys can tell me what Harry is, but it's either that's a good idea, here's why that might be a good idea, or here's why that won't work. And if you have a boss that's a here's why that won't work person, you're screwed. If you're an ideas person, if you have a boss that's like, yeah, there's a piece in there, like keep working, that's who you want to work for. So when we were coming up with the Ringer, I think a big part of us was like culture, people that wanted to be there, people that had the right kind of personality, because we knew people had to work hard. We want to go a little younger, but we also wanted people that are going to have ideas and are going to throw them out, and some of them aren't going to work, but that's okay because the ones that work are the ones that stick. Well, how are you as a boss? Because you're now starting this business, and you guys are doing really well, but you're also trying to foster that same kind of environment for your talent. You have some of them here.
Yeah,
we call them talent.
You call them whatever you want. I think it's been easier this time because I kind of know what I'm doing compared to 5 years ago. And the big thing is you got to get your inner circle and then just delegate. And at Grantland, I was probably too involved with all, everything. And this time around, it's just you need an inner circle that understands you and what you want, but can also go and do it and be actually good and kind of carry the message and also create different versions of the message. And I think we've figured out a good version of that here. But you look at, it can be anything. It could be sports or like Belichick, right? Belichick always has like.
I knew somehow this was going back.
Well, sorry.
I was waiting for it. I was like, at some point we're going to get to Belichick.
Belichick has his 4 or 5 people those are his. He's got Ernie Adams. Nobody even knows what that guy does. I think he might be a spy. Like he has binoculars and he's just studying plays. He's got that guy. He always has the one GM. And he's got his 5 people, but those people can pretty much change. But it's always around 5. And then you look at like sorry for using all Boston analogies, but like the Celtics have had the same ownership structure, same GM, same assistant GM, same president, same CMO, and 2 different coaches in 11 years. And I think when you have stability and nucleus like that, that's where you want to be. I think the more flux and in the inner circle can be bad unless you have Bill Belichick, the winner of Super Bowl 51.
So with that as the backdrop,
yeah.
I'm so glad you're here because you guys are about to launch the definitive documentary on Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
And there's no bigger wrestling fan in this room than probably me.
Really?
As a matter of fact, one of my things I do, you mentioned me as a boss, when I interview people for jobs, I make them wrestle me. Yes. So everybody that's here has either taken a fall for me or they pin me right here.
Idea.
Yes. So when you guys get the idea, let's do the definitive documentary in kind of Ringer style of Andre the Giant's going to be on HBO. How does that begin, and then how does your 5 and the people around you bring it to life?
So that's a little different because, first of all, that when we were figuring out 30 for 30, that was always on the short list for me. It was like 9 or 10 docs, and it was always Andre's one of the docs. And at that point, the WWE just wanted to own everything, and they did that stuff themselves. They had a big VHS/DVD business at that point, and if they were going to do an Andre thing, they were going to do it.
Yeah, and toys. And shirts,
all that stuff.
Thing, yeah.
They didn't really need anybody. And when I went with HBO, things shifted, and HBO definitely their ability to go into basically any country, the halo of HBO, all that stuff. I think they were a little more receptive to it. And in that case, the key person is the director, and we got an awesome director in Jason Ayre, who just really believed in the story. He's somebody I'd worked with before. And then the real question is, what's the story? And, I think the documentaries that work the best they have the A story and the B story. And the A story was Andre, who's this wrestler who knows he's going to die from basically the time he's 20. He's got this pituitary thing that it's just he's going to die. He's not going to live till he's 50, and he doesn't want to take care of it. So there's this ceiling on what he can do. And then the B story is basically how wrestling blew up in the early 80s and how he was this relic of in the 70s when everything was local, everything's on local TV, and there was no big omnipotent place. And then Vince McMahon changes all that and puts the whole business behind Hulk Hogan. But the thing they need is him to have this match with Andre, but Andre's breaking down because he's eventually going to die. And Andre has to summon this, he's got to make it for WrestleMania 3. He's got to have a good match. So that's like the perfect doc because it's got the A story, it's got the B story. It's got great stories. You also need, when you're doing a doc, you need like 4 or 5 people who are just awesome interviews. And then it's got the curiosity factor. The guy, who knows? Was he 7 feet? Was he 7'4"? Was he 400 pounds? Was he 580 pounds? did he really drink 150 beers in a single sitting? All that stuff.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He did. I read about it. He
Ric
absolutely
Flair
did.
said 106. So, and then Rob Reiner has a story about how he drank a whole case of Beaujolais in one day on the Princess Bride set, and it's really like the perfect person for a documentary. So I've never felt more confident in any documentary I've ever been involved with than this one.
So, and then from here, I mean, this will be part of a lot of projects, I'm assuming.
Yeah, this year we announced Ringer Films, and
hopefully a lot more wrestling projects.
Yeah, you never know. Non-scripted is a really fun area to get involved with right now. There's a lot of people that want to get in it, and the bar has weirdly been lowered because there's been so many of them. So there's opportunity to do some good stuff, I think.
And this is April 10th, I believe, is the...
Andre's April 10th, and Andre's going to be a monster. It's going to be huge, I think. It's just really good.
We're going to do our part here on April 9th as part of Callaway Live. The entire audience, including myself, will be drinking an entire case of Beaujolais.
Wearing the one strap?
Yeah, we'll be live streaming that in honor of you.
What do you think would be the dream golf documentary that is actually realistic?
Oh gosh, that's interesting because there's so many stories that I find fascinating, like the African Americans that played golf that you never even heard about, that sort of barnstormed around. That whole circuit.
Is there footage?
Is it probably not? That would make a documentary tough. Yeah.
We're in the room. I'm like, great. That's a great idea.
I think
I need footage.
One of the things that fascinates. Yeah, that's a little bit of a hurdle. One of the things that fascinates me also about the pre-Palmer Nicklaus era is a lot of these guys supplemented their income by playing these barnstorming gambling events, and they would get hundreds of people to show up and gamble, and they'd make $5,000, $6,000, $7,000.
As opposed to now, where nobody gambles on golf.
Exactly, except for Joe House. But that was a huge part of their income because on tour they couldn't really scratch a living. But some of the best players you've ever heard of played in these sort of unsanctioned gambling events that were put up by bookmakers. But that's a story that not very many people have told. You should do that one.
Well, part of the problem with all this stuff is that people do the documentaries and they kind of pee on the idea, but they do it badly. And then it's like, so is this off limits now? Like Greg Norman, a couple people have taken runs at, and there was a pretty good sports century about him, and then there's been a couple other things. And to me, he's like the most tragic individual figure, not team sports, but individual sports. He's probably the most tragic of the last 35 years. And if you played his career 20 times, we probably ended up with the bad outcome of those 20 times,
the worst
right?
20, yeah.
If he just gets over the hump in any of those, he might have been the best golfer of all time. And instead, it was just like these series, like even just to be there in '86, which would have been his first, major moment. And then it's just by chance, it's Nicholas having this like sports movie, and he finishes, and Norman and Ballesteros are still out there, and the crowd's rooting against them, and they're rooting for them to shank it. Like, that's probably the hardest situation two golfers have ever been in, where the gallery is like, we hate you, we want you to lose, we want the sports movie ending. So that's somebody that maybe enough time passes, and he's a great documentary, I think.
I agree with you. Is there other things you're thinking about from sports perspective that you got it, right?
Yeah, I think what's really fun about the internet right now is people are starting to figure out how to make internet content for the internet. And I think all this decade, as videos started shifting and people started trying stuff on the internet, they were making TVs, things that should be on TV just for the internet. And now people are starting to think about it a little more creatively, and I include everyone at the Ringer. And it's challenging. It's fun. It's like, how do we have this person. How do we figure out something with them? Or we have this sport or whatever. Like, golf is something that I think would be really fun to try to figure out an idea with that. But it's almost like you have to strip it back and be like, we don't need to do this giant whatever. It's this show we have now, NBA Desktop, that's Jace Concepcion, who works for us, and it's basically like Talk Soup meets the NBA, but it's it's in a closet with like 8 posters behind him. You know, it's like and it just kind of goes and it moves and people pop up, and it's not something that can be on TV. And I think there's a lot of growth for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, every now and then you'll see these people that think you got to build a set and then have 2 chairs and a conversation. You're like, what are they doing? Like,
no, well, NBA TV drives me crazy because it's like, it's a time machine where it's like these big giant sets from 1993 in these old coaches and players, and it's like you just find 5 people on the internet and shoot them with their iPhones and probably save a lot of that stuff. This is golf needs respect. This set works.
Yeah, it's a very
golf
respectful.
Is a big respectful. It's Jim Nance at the Butler cabin.
And all we need is a Tom Brady rug right here to step on, and we'll be good.
You be careful with Tom Brady. He's going to be playing.
Don't say that.
He's going to be playing until he's 50.
Well, I know one thing, that we will be successful if we continue to just sort of be inspired and rip off all the stuff you guys do for Ringer.
It's not a rip off. Well, you guys are our partners.
It's inspiration.
You guys are an OG partner of ours. And we gave the world Joe House.
That's right. We gave birth to Joe House.
Joe House was he used to be somebody I just shared with my friends, and now we're sharing him with America.
Like in a box. We'll let him
he's
out.
hosting 2 podcasts. Like, the dude's a maniac.
And now we'll never get him back in the box. But we really appreciate you coming on. We know that you don't do this stuff a lot. And
I don't.
It means a lot for us to be here, for you to be here. And we love the relationship, and looking forward to all the cool stuff that you guys do.
It's always fun to come down here and see some extended family.
And get some more yardage we got for you today, too, which we like.
I like that you keep creating clubs that make my drive go further than it should.
Yeah. Yeah, right? You keep making great content, we'll keep doing that.
It's like having Botox, but for my golf game or something. Like, nobody has to know that I can't drive the ball 280 yards, but yeah, it's good.
I like that. That could be the name
I also
of our
like
next
how you have all these names you name your drivers after these like very aggressive, aggro, short word names.
Right.
Yeah. Epic.
Yeah.
What's next one? Rogue.
Rogue, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
it's good.
Botox. We'll get you to endorse that one.
Ringer would be a good driver name.
That would be a great name.
Ringer.
For a driver. Yeah,
the Ringer X, Ringer Pro. This is great. Let's finish it.
Sign you up. It's like $10 a club coming your way.
Great.
For that one.
All right. I'll do it.
That's Bill Simmons. He is the originator and founder of the new Ringer X driver. Right here on us. Thanks for being here, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bill Simmons. We'll see you next